If you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong as a listener and as a creator. Like, it has to feel fun. It has to be.
Hey, it's Renee. Welcome to the Into the Wild Show, the podcast for women who want to build incredible mental strength to level up their business and lifestyle. I'm Renee Warren, the founder of We Wild Women, author, speaker, award-winning entrepreneur, and your host. Together, we will make you unapologetic about shining your light, growing your business, and turning you into a wildly confident and successful leader. This is for you, the visionary, the go-getter, the entrepreneur, and for those that need a real kick in the butt to get going and to dream bigger. Each week, I bring in leading experts and entrepreneurs to help you take leaps in the right direction, because I know the best advice comes from someone who has successfully done it before. So, are you ready to level up? Welcome to Into the Wild. Hey, you wild women! My next guest is an award-winning broadcaster and strategist with more than 2 decades of professional storytelling and on-camera experience. She is now the CEO and founder of Story Studio Network. Founded in 2021, SSN has quickly become one of the country's most sought-after branded podcast networks. With a growing team of major market talent, including hosts, podcasters, producers, engineers, and sales staff, SSN is a new media company that blends Erin's decades of lived mainstream media experience and her years as a digital content strategist and creator. Story Studio Network works with brands and organizations as a stem-to-stem podcast production company, building compelling branded shows from ideation through production right through to marketing. In this episode, Erin and I chat about all the interesting podcast stats, why certain metrics don't matter as much as we think, like downloads, why podcasting as a host and as a guest is so important in today's marketing mix, the future of podcasting, but put it this way, there are over 6 million shows and only 200,000 of them are active, which means there is so much opportunity for anyone that wants to use podcasting in their marketing mix. And finally, how small businesses can leverage podcasting to amplify their message and increase their authority. Please welcome the incredible Erin Trafford.
Hi, Renee. How are you? I feel like I should clap. I'm like coast to coast.
It's like being a contestant on The Price is Right.
Oh my goodness, Bob Barker, right?
I know, Bob. So
yes, let's do
this.
Yeah.
So I don't even know when I learned about you. It was definitely when I used to live on the East Coast. So it had to have been over 3-4 years ago, even more than that. I feel like I knew about you when I ran my last PR agency.
You probably did. Because I mean, if you were in PR out here, I was in the newsrooms out here. So not to say like I was kind of a big deal, but I was kind of a big deal back then.
Yeah, of course. The funny thing is that we hardly had any clients on the East Coast.
Right.
It's all like California or somewhere else in the world.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, it's a small community, so we know of each other. And then I'm putting on this series, Master Your Marketing Mindset series, and you and I exchanged a thread. Is that what it's called? A thread? We threaded our way into a podcast analytics conversation. And to most people, that's not sexy, but to us, we're like, woohoo! It was the best thread exchange I've ever had in my life.
I'm so glad I gave you pleasure talking about downloads, analytics, and metrics. And the hilarious thing is that of my whole team, I'm like the worst at that. Like I hired people smarter than me to be on my team to have those conversations. So I appreciate that I tickled your fancy.
You did.
That's hilarious.
I'm like, I love somebody that can intelligently and tastefully disagree. And that's where it came from. It was like, oh, she doesn't agree with me, but why? And I was like, oh, it's a really good perspective, because the whole thing was about the metric of a podcast health based on the download numbers.
Yeah.
And you're like, no. And then you told me all the reason why that wasn't right. And I was like,
well, I'll correct myself too, because I don't want to say the download isn't right. Here's what I'll say the download is. Because we get asked that question all the time. And I call it's kind of like the XY problem. So when somebody comes to me and says, I want a podcast and how do we get more downloads? Like, everybody asks that question at some point, how do we get more downloads? And I always follow it up with, why do you want more downloads? Like, why do you want that? So there's there's two reasons I ask that. A, because their answer, I know we're talking about content marketing and like, really making smart strategic decisions for your business. When you're a business owner, you don't have time to be chasing a metric that isn't going to help your bottom line. So I ask that question because it's like, if I think downloads is going to help your bottom line, then heck yes, we're going to chase the downloads. But 99% of the time, it is not going to help your bottom line. And it's the most expensive metric to chase. So when I ask that question, it's usually, folks kind of pause and they think, well, gee, why do I want those downloads? And then we can get into a conversation about what all the other fun things that we can measure that create value around your podcast, that create a different story around your podcast, that give it more niche appeal that you can be looking at, that and you come from the world of PR, so you understand pitching, that allow that value pitch to accelerate versus I have 10,000 downloads a month, or I have 5,000 CEOs that listen to my show every single year. And you know what? They listen to 99% of all of my episodes.
From the start to the finish
from the start to the finish for a full whatever it is, right? So you really got to think like, what are you trying to do? The other thing in podcasting right now is it's not a nascent industry. It's been around for a long time. And I've been in the business for a long time. I will age myself and say I launched the podcast division at Western University in 2006 when I went to the dean and I was like, this podcasting thing is going to be a thing.
Wow. 2006?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I had to like march in there with my little clipboard and say to the dean, I was like, I think this is going to be a thing. Can I have like permission to launch one on campus? And they were like, go do your thing. So I kind of, and back then it was really hard to podcast. So that's like a fun little tidbit about my journey to here. I've been in podcasting for a long time. And so the thing that's frustrating for those of us who are in it is that the technology hasn't yet caught up to the strategy. So the download in many cases is just kind of the best metric we have right now. But there are some people way smarter than I am who are working to change that, building better apps, building better aggregators, building more curation in the back end. It seems like every month Apple and Spotify, they're trying to one up each other in terms of the data on the back end of their platforms. So I think really in the next few years, you're going to see fewer and fewer people asking about that download number.
Cool. Would it be like similar to YouTube subscribers?
No, because I think a subscriber is actually worth more than a download. So that's the other thing is like, what does it actually mean? So a subscriber on Apple is somebody who has actively, I think of a subscriber on Apple for your show is closer to like a follower or a connection on LinkedIn, where you're like, I actively am choosing to be in the orbit of this show because it's part of my, what's in it for me kind of thing, versus a download, which you can download a show and never subscribe. Right. So they're also like, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with that metric.
Yeah.
So anyway, did I reconvince you?
Oh, you did when you disagreed with me and I was angry at you for not agreeing with me, but then you were right. I was like, oh, okay, she's so right. But no, I did agree with you. I was like, yeah, it's such a stupid thing. Even now, like I'm building out this media list for one of our biggest clients, top influencer. She's got like 80 million followers. And they asked what the download numbers were for some of these shows.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, but Lewis Howes might say, oh, like 200 million downloads, but what does it matter? And then there's other shows that aren't as significant as his. They don't share their download numbers.
Right.
And
precisely.
I think there's other ways of looking at how that show can be a benefit to have this guest on.
Yeah.
And it's the questions that they ask, how they show up in the interview, how they're sharing it in their newsletter or social media. And even like, if think about it too, it's in the grand scheme of things in the world, I'm a nobody. However, I can go on somebody else's show and drop so much value that I get customers because of it.
Yeah. I love that strategy. And sometimes folks will come to me and say, I really, really, really want a podcast. And then the way our shop works is we're not just going to say, okay, here, sign on the dotted line, put you into the process. Like it's really important for us as a network especially focusing on branded content and the way that we've grown the company, is that we are as much a fit for you as you are for us, right? Mm-hmm. And so part of that is understanding that when it comes to your content marketing stack, like there's social media and there's email marketing and there's SEO and there's all this stuff. And podcasting is this funny little blend. And I say you have to come to it with a co-creative energy, no matter what. So like you and I right now, we're co-creating energy. So even if you're just doing it on your own, when you invite a guest into the space, you have to be in this collaborative state of mind. You have to be committed to creating that space, right? If you're working with a production company like ours, and we do work with some solopreneurs and small to medium-sized businesses because it's part of my mission to make all of this accessible and easy for folks. But part of this is like, if I hear you give me indication that you're not able to kind of meet us halfway and collaborate and create space and hold space for yourself, then it's not a fit. So I don't know what I'm saying other than I think podcasting is this really cool blend of all of these different elements of content creation that makes it not really be content marketing. It's almost more like relationship marketing.
It's totally that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And this is why having my clients go on a podcast roadshow for if they're launching a book or whatever is so important, because I say, you don't understand the value of the relationship you're making with the host.
Yes.
That alone for some people is a game changer for their business or for whatever they're trying to achieve. And then to be able to be on someone's show where their listeners, like we were talking about, will tune in for 15, 20, 30 minutes. And they're listening. Like if I said to you, hey, what is the value of having you be in front of, even if it's just 200 listeners that are your ideal customer for 30 minutes and you can talk about all the things you're great at? What would that mean to you?
That's huge.
People don't even think of it like that.
Even if it was 60 people, 50, like if you think about actually putting that many people in a room, like that would be a full room. A full room of people. The other thing, the nugget that we drop as you're talking about like hosting and guesting and stuff, because I love that strategy. And so when somebody comes to me and they say, I really want a podcast, but I sense that they don't, maybe they've got a lot of stuff going on in their business, or like, I say this with like self-compassion because I've also launched a podcast 3 weeks postpartum. If I get a new mom and I can sense that she's like, I want a podcast, but I'm also having a baby. And I'm like, yeah, you might want to have the baby and see how things work out first. It's a good strategy to try to get on other people's shows before you decide to launch your own, because launching your own really does require you to hold that space. And then the other thing we say to folks is when you're considering presence and how you're showing up and what you're bringing in terms of value and all that stuff, is your listeners, it's always listener first, right? So who's listening? They're going to come for the host. So the folks listening to us right now, like I want to be like, hi, Judy, right? Like she's out walking the dog. She's listening to us talk, but she's come because she probably more likely than not knows you. So she's come for you. And that's why she's going to stay. She'll be intrigued by your guest. So they come for the guest, they stay for the host. Right? So the hosting is like, it's so critical that both, and so back to that co-collaborative, like co-creative space, you have to be able to be in that space when you're in a podcast, no matter what.
So I blame Amy Porterfield for sucking me into doing podcasts.
Okay.
And she doesn't know this, because I remember this all too clearly. Why I got into this is I was profusely downloading all of her episodes. We were renting a place in San Diego for 3 months, one winter. Long story short, the place that we had rented ended up getting some sort of plumbing issues. So they found us an equivalent place, but it was much further away from the place we had put our kids into daycare. And my round trip, total time in the car to bring them to and from, pick them up and whatnot, was like 3 hours a day. Right? So I'm like, what are the podcasts? Then my friend Diana was like, hey, this Amy Porterfield girl, check her out. And this was like in 2017 or 2018. I don't even know when it was. And so I listened to every single episode. And she said, podcasting is the new blogging. And I was like, perfect. I think blogging takes up way too much time. So I'm going to turn into podcasting. How hard is it to just record yourself into a microphone? Wow, did I ever learn. It is extremely time consuming. And then if you want to do it well, I'm sorry, it ain't free for the most part. You have a production team, you have an editor. There's a lot that goes into it. And so the people that get past X amount of episodes, I have so much respect for because it's a lot. And I know the people that give up, I get it too. I was at a conference, in 2019, and they said
in the before times. In the before times. That's what we call it. Like
2019 is the before time.
Well, before the great panini happened, right? The before time.
Before the thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So the prehistoric times. Right. I don't know. So the before times.
Yes.
And they were saying how most shows don't go past 8 episodes.
It's called pod fade. I can tell you those stats. Yeah.
Is it still the case today?
So here, this might blow your mind about the opportunity in podcasting, which I actually wish like our VP Andrea was on this call because she has all these committed to memory and I have just a few of them, but I'll drop you some nuggets that I know. So pod fade is this terrible term, but it's the term we give to the phenomenon of people starting podcasts and then stopping. And for whatever reason. So there's 3 points along your podcast journey where you are likely to fall victim to it. The first is at episode 3. And that's where you kind of, go out with your buddies and you think, oh, it would be really great to have a podcast about Batman. And then you do 3 episodes and you're like, I have nothing more to say about Batman. So you just stop. Like that's what that is, right? The next is between 8 and 12. So that's typically that crunch point when the solopreneur has gotten in and then they have this like holy moly moment when they have that exact realization. What you just said is like, this is a lot of work. I thought this was going to be easy, but I'm spending hours of my time. Sometimes it's editing or scripting or whatever their hang up is. They'll drop off around that. The other point is at around 50 episodes, which typically lines up to the year mark. And this is where we pull it back to, we're talking about ROI. What we've seen, and I think it was Libsyn, who's one of the largest hosting companies in the world and the oldest, they determined that it happens at 50 episodes on a weekly show. People will stop because that's the point when most fail to see return. So it's like, I've done this for a year and I can't draw a direct line between the effort that I'm putting into my podcast and my bank account. Here's the stat that matches that is that for those podcasters that get past that 50 mark, that get to 18 months in or whatever it may be, that's when the exponential returns start. So it's like, it's a commitment. It's a commitment to continuing to hold that space. And it scares people. But if you do, then the potential is massive.
I actually had that question today on my coaching call with Eleanor.
Yeah.
I was like, the question was vague. I was like, what do we do with the business strategy of which you can't directly see the ROI? And I didn't tell her what it was. And I said, it was my podcast. And then we actually dove deep. And she goes, this has been like shooting out ROI for you in levels you don't even know. It's not because there's a direct paycheck into your account from podcasting. But for me, it's been networking, relationship building. I've gotten clients because they were guests on my show and vice versa. But it's just not. And then, so for me, when I launched, I said, oh, if the statistic is most podcasts fail after 8 episodes, I'm going to launch with 9. Because then I already defied the odds. So I recorded 9 episodes and then I launched my podcast.
So the other wild stat, like talked about YouTube subscribers, is like, I don't know how many YouTube channels there are in the world now. Like I want to say a bajillion, accurate number, a bajillion. Yep. So there's many. The podcast landscape is still completely unsaturated. And I know like you might go on LinkedIn or Instagram and it's like everybody and their monkey has a podcast these days, but not everybody is consistent. So when you look at the podcast world writ large, there's about, give or take, 6 million podcasts, which is not that many. When you look at like YouTube or Instagram accounts or Facebook pages or whatever, like it's really not that many. So you take that number and then you think of what is the definition of an active podcast? An active podcast is one that has been updated in the last 90 days. So all of a sudden, the active podcasts in the world, there's only about 200,000.
What?
Okay. So like, that's a reason to find the space, jump in and commit because you still are at like the hockey stick hasn't gone up yet and it will. It's a good time.
That is, well, you just made me proud of myself. So thank you. Thank you.
See, it's like clapping everywhere.
I know. Because again, I'm on in April it'll be 4 years. And this will be, I don't know, past the 200 mark.
You're killing it.
Episode.
You've lapped half of the world.
Right? In a motorless boat. That's what it feels like. I have gone around the world 4 times. Yes. That's what it feels like.
That's amazing.
And then I look at like the statistics. I'm like, but they're not, to me, it's like, it's not there because we talked about downloads.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you now for making me feel much better about what is.
You're killing it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so we're like 19 minutes in and I still haven't properly introduced you or asked what you did. But I think at this point now, if you're really interested in podcasting, Erin's the person to go to.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. And you've had quite the career, which has landed you exactly where you need to be. But why did you decide to lean into podcasting after a career in broadcasting?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in broadcasting my entire life. So I started my career in Toronto and bounced around and then ended up on the East Coast because I met my husband and he kind of kept me here.
Wait, so where are you from in Ontario?
Toronto.
You're from Toronto?
I grew up in Toronto. Yeah.
We have similar lives. I was born and raised in North Bay and then lived in Moncton, New Brunswick for 9 years because of my husband.
Well, it's funny you should say North Bay because there's a big announcement happening next week based on when we're recording this. I launched a radio station in North Bay in 2006.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
I know. Crazy. I feel like we're going to have to do an after show.
Where are we now?
Bonus episode. So to answer your question, I worked in radio my whole life, worked in television, network television, did all of the things and won all the awards, interviewed all the fancy people and decided to jump ship when things just started getting really toxic in the industry. And there was just a lot of changes going on and I needed a fresh take in my life. So I carved my own path working with pretty large brands in Canada as an executive content strategist, because effectively what I was able to do was say, look, I really understand digital. I used to own a really big digital property. I actually just sold it last year to help fund what we're doing with Story Studio now. I understand digital. I understand media. I'm this weird unicorn because I can also do live TV. I can also do all these things. So really big brands were coming to me, just little old me. I had no team. And I built this consulting company. And then 2021 came and I got a text from my dad. So my dad is also a veteran broadcaster in Canada. He's run the largest newsrooms in the country. And he texted me and said, it was just kind of like, do you have time for a quick call? And I was like, oh, there's something else here, right? And he was still on the air in Toronto at the largest talk radio station in the country. And he was doing podcast editing off the side of his desk for fun. And I was like, Dad, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? And he was like, Erin, I'm getting asked to do this like so much. I don't know what to do with it. And I said, okay, well, stop what you're doing and let's put some thought into this. And 90 minutes later, we had the seeds of what would become Story Studio Network. And 2.5 years later, we've worked with, we've produced more than 36 branded shows for some of the largest organizations in the country. We have a team of 9. I hire only major market journalists and broadcasters, producers. Like, it's wild. I want to drop an F-bomb right now. It's that wild. Like, it's just been such a crazy ride of like taking my old life in the newsroom and then my 10 years as a content strategist working with brands and then kind of putting the brilliance of my dad and then my kind of stick-to-itiveness together to create this new company that is exactly what the market was looking for at the exact right time. So I don't sleep a lot, but we have so much fun. Like this is the most fun I've had in my whole life. Like,
it's
to be
amazing.
Honest. Yeah.
So when did the business start?
When was the text message sent? I can tell you that. It was April 2021.
Wow.
So we've been just over 2.5 years. Right. And after he sent that text message, to give you a sense of the velocity of how we've been able to really push branded podcasting, which is pretty deeply entrenched in the States and in the UK, but it's still very new in Canada. We had our first sold out paid show within 5 days of the text message. And we didn't even have a company. We were like, well, we probably should like make this official before we take people's money. Yeah. 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 Okay. So Yeah, we use that term in the industry and a lot of folks don't fully understand it. They're like, what's the difference? So here's the way that we like to define it. And you can Google it and there's lots of different definitions. But the easiest one to understand is a branded podcast is an ad your listeners want to listen to. Mm-hmm. So best example I can give you right now of branded content that's not a podcast is the Barbie movie. Mm. That was an ad for Barbie. That was an ad for Mattel, but like we all really, really wanted to watch it.
I have not seen it yet.
It's very good.
I know.
But you know what I mean, right? Yeah. Like it's so branded content is where we take your brand, whether it's your business, your personal brand, in some case, an organization, stakeholders, whatever it may be. And we put it through an editorial lens so that the values of that brand get communicated through audio first format. Mm. And it's super powerful at conversions. We've seen conversion rates, depending on what you're measuring, upwards of 67%.
Wow.
Brand stickiness is off the charts, like off the charts.
Okay, so why? Why is that?
Because there's something about, and there are studies to prove this, and I don't want to like inundate you with all the footnotes, but like they do exist. So I'll send you the report with all of the stuff and you can link it afterwards if you really want to get nerdy about this. We have a 50-page report that explains all of this, but I'm not even kidding. It's 50 pages. But there's something about the way we listen to podcasts that activates a different part of our brain. So studies in the UK, the BBC did one a couple of years ago, proves that we listen to podcasts when we're doing other things. We're doing the dishes, we're walking the dog, we're on the treadmill, we're assembling IKEA furniture, whatever we're doing. It creates a different interaction in our brain that elevates our ability to have brand recognition and recall, which when you're selling something over the long term is a massive boon. The other thing we know is that the average podcast listener is a 39-year-old female. She listens to approximately, if she is an invested podcast listener, she's listening to about 5 podcasts on the regular. And of those 5 podcasts, she is listening to 85% of every single episode. So when you talk about inserting your brand message into a podcast, she's listening to every episode. She's hearing you repeat it. She's emotionally connecting to it. Like you said, she's expecting that experience when she's taking the kids to daycare. It's like part of her habitual routine, and she builds it into her me time. You start to look at how powerful that can be as an engine for getting your message out there. And it doesn't have to sound like an ad. In fact, if it does sound like an ad, the studies prove that they'll tune out. So our secret sauce at SSN is that we take what you want to do, and 90% of our clients come to us and what they kind of want to do is an ad. And we're like, here's how to do that, not an ad.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love this. And I think of all the times where I listen to the podcast. Mm-hmm. Most of the time it's on the drive home from driving my kids to school and when I'm getting ready. So there's like from 8:15 to 9:30 in the morning, 5 days a week, I'm listening.
Yep.
And it's probably about 5 different podcasts. And I cycle through things that are in my industry, motivation, health. Mm-hmm. So it's like different facets of my life.
Yep.
And it's like, I know more about these people's personal life that could ever be possible because I know everything that they share online.
And you trust them, right?
Totally.
Yep.
And it's weird because some of these people I've actually met, they've been guests on my show. And when they show up, it's like I already know them. Mm-hmm. So it's not, for me, it's like I'm not as scared to talk to them. I'm like, I know you already.
It's so powerful. And then on top of that, I'm like, if you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong as a listener and as a creator. Like it has to feel fun. It has to be.
Aren't these podcast tips just incredible? I know I'm learning a lot. Erin is a wealth of knowledge. She's been in the journalism broadcasting space for so long. How can we not appreciate the fact that where she started from and where she is today is a completely different landscape? It is quite fascinating. And so with that, I did want to let you know that I have a free workshop coming up on October 25th. It's called the Preloaded Marketing Year Workshop. And it is all about making sure that you as a small business owner are ready for 2024. In this workshop, I'm going to teach you about emerging trends in digital marketing, about some free tools to crush your year, and not to overwhelm you with all these free tools, but just to give you some of my own tools that I use and some advice on how to use them. You'll also learn the importance of planning ahead key timelines and annual themes. And ladies, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know very well that in order to be successful in marketing and PR especially, you need to plan out at least 6 months. Because podcasts, for instance, to be a guest on some shows, the lead times is 6 months to a year. So if you're launching a book, you're announcing something, a new product, a new service, you want to make sure that you are ready today. Arguably, today is too late, but you're ready today for what is coming in 2024. I'll also teach you how to create your 2024 marketing calendar and how to implement an effective work-back schedule. So this is free to attend, and it's on October 25th at 9 a.m. PST. To sign up, all you got to do is go to wewildwomen.com/workshop. That's wewildwomen.com/workshop. I hope to see you there. When I started podcasting, it was during the time.
The times.
That's how we're talking,
Yeah.
the times.
Yeah.
And it was actually April of 2020. And for most of the first, 20 recordings, I needed that conversation more than I think anybody else involved to be with these women, to chat about that stuff. And these are like, if you really want to listen to these episodes, you go back to like episodes 1 through 30. And I've come a long way.
It's like therapy. It's like pandemic therapy, right? Like, yeah.
So much fun. But now I'm seeing the value. And what I love about you is you're like, it's not necessarily downloads. There's so much more. And you're talking about all this stuff. This is why it's important if you don't have the time to start a podcast, to go on a podcast tour or just go on shows that are relevant to you. So the next question that to me is probably going to be my favorite question is, how is this branded podcasting interacting with and enhancing PR and earned media in this changing landscape?
So fun, right? So what we've noticed, and this is happening, you see this, the news landscape inventory is changing, right? Like newsrooms are shrinking. There's not as much, especially for broadcast. It's harder to get coverage. And like COVID sucked the oxygen right out of the room. Even if you had a really great pitch, like it was really hard to pick up. So what we've seen is a lot of our clients are taking some of that PR spend. And like, don't get me wrong, I am not a PR expert. And I think like it's such a necessary component to this, but they're putting some of that toward creating the podcast asset. And then what they're doing is they're using that as like advocacy or thought leadership and pitching that to media. And we're seeing bigger uptake. So what it's doing is it's a double-barreled approach where the media is talking about the podcast, which builds the brand cred, gets a story across, and then we see the uptick on the podcast side. So one of our clients is the largest food bank in Canada. They were having trouble. How crazy is this? They were having trouble getting coverage. So we're on season 3 with them, and we're starting to use the podcast to drive the news agenda in their market because so much was being left, no pun intended, on the table by mainstream media with the depth of the issues that they wanted to cover. So it's a fascinating development. And I think it just shows how powerful and malleable a podcast can be when you're looking at like the spread of what you're investing in for your business.
Yeah. Oh, I love this. Because I think that, even nowadays, the way I see it is, it arguably has more weight in being the guest on the right podcast than it does to get features and other shows, publications, whatnot.
Agree. It's entirely dependent, but yeah, I totally agree.
People don't see that. And I
maybe they will now.
I do now. I teach this, and I have one client just the other day. Actually, she came up to me and she's like, she texted me. That's pretty much coming up to me, and she said, "Hey, Renee, I was on 3 podcasts that are super relevant to her industry in real estate, land investment. I don't know nothing about that." She's like, "Yeah, I had my best month ever. I garnered about $100,000 worth of revenue in a month." And I said, "Because of those shows? Because of those shows." Right place, right time, right conversation. Yep. And she knows what she's talking about. Super niche too, what she does. And so I'm like, ROI baby, right there.
Yeah. Yeah, completely agree. There's so much you can do if you're willing to open up your mind a little bit and be more creative about what it could mean to be on or have one.
Right. So then speaking of mind, what is the toughest mindset that we must master in order to be great at podcasting, whether that means hosting our own or being on someone else's show?
Yeah, this is such a great question. I think it's what holds a lot of folks back from jumping in, big organizations or small solopreneurs, is I find a lot of folks feel like they don't have anything to say or that they're not worthy of taking up that space. And it's a blatant lie. Like it's just not true.
So if you feel this, then what is something that you can practice doing to be more confident?
Oh my gosh, there's so many, that goes back into like my media coaching time is like making sure that you know how to be on mic. I'm like, I love that. We can, that's a whole other kettle of fish. But I think what it is like being confident enough to know like you're an expert and you do have stuff to say. What I find is we put an expert who's all over the place, right? Like they're kind of a pinball in the room with the right producer. The right producer can give you those guardrails. What you're really looking for are guardrails. Right.
So one of the things that we do is we say, what are the top 1, 2, or 3 things you can talk about with confidence? And I say with confidence is if I tell you you're going on stage in 10 minutes to talk for 20 minutes about something, no preparation, what's it going to be in your industry?
Yeah.
And then I go, what are the personal stories and anecdotes in your life that relate to those things? Because the moment you can think of a time in your life and that story is when things just become so easy for you to talk about. Also, people remember stories because stories evoke emotion, and emotion is how people remember things, right? Because people remember how they feel, not what you say.
Yes, 100%, 100%. So that's the biggest thing stopping people from my perspective, because I think when you asked that question, you probably meant like, what is my biggest challenge? Is like the imposter syndrome for me growing this company is just like, honestly, I know this is so cliche, but it's like feel the fear and do it anyway. I'm like, this has been a crazy ride, but everyone says it. They're like, well, you have the background. Of course you're doing this. Like, that's the number one response I get is like, of course you're doing this. And like, I have to convince myself of that every single day when I wake up. I'm like, of course I'm doing this.
I thought that too. I could never imagine you would think otherwise.
Right?
Why?
I'm going to get that, of course, like right across my chest, like prison tat, of course. So I can look in the mirror every day and be like, yes!
So on every show you're on, it just shows up every time on your chest. Of course. Hashtag. And you also started this while having babies.
Yeah. Yes. Also that.
Why do we do that? I feel like most women, it's like they're either starting a business after having babies or moving, or maybe all at the same time.
Oh my gosh. So
why do we do this?
Super quick. I was one of my biggest clients. It was home hardware at the time. And I was wrapping up a campaign with them, but it meant renovating my entire kitchen because we did it all in my house. So we did a whole national media thing that I produced, filmed. I mean, I hired a crew, but I was starring in. It was in my house. We were ripping apart my kitchen. I had a baby 3 months prior. So we had to also move out. And it was October of 2020. So my daughter was born end of July 2020, middle of the pandemic. October, still the middle of the pandemic. We had to move out with an infant, breastfeeding, doing a national campaign, renovating my kitchen. I don't know how I survived, but I did.
Wow. Okay, first of all, that's hard enough. And then is this like live television?
I didn't do live that week.
But you were still on the hook to do this.
Yeah, we did. Okay. I did live all through the pandemic. I was still consulting for all these companies and doing integrated media, and like the number of national media tours I did from my kitchen, is hilarious. So you want to know how to shoot national TV on an iPhone? I did it. And then also while pregnant, like hugely pregnant in my kitchen.
I mean, and those are the days I remember I just wanted to hide. I'm like, don't talk to me. Don't touch me. Don't ask me questions. Please don't ask me.
Yeah.
Super pregnant with babies and running a business.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to add with podcasting and this whole landscape?
I just think lean in. If you are feeling that little tingle in your spine, like lean in and reach out to us. Honestly, like we're super chill and relaxed. So if you send us an email, we'll set you up with someone from our team to have a conversation. If we think it's for you, we'll tell you. If we think we're not for you, we'll tell you. Like I'm a no pressure kind of gal. But the more women we can get on mic, the more women we can get harnessing this power. There's so much opportunity.
Totally.
I will be very happy.
Yeah, your team is great to work with.
I'm obsessed with my team.
Who was it, Jamie? And there was somebody else in this email. Because I remember asking you to be a guest on the show. And then you said, email these people. And then I did. And it's like right away, boom, boom.
Yeah.
And they're like, I think I emailed them on a Thursday or a Friday. Oh, it was a Friday. And they're like, yeah, we'll get this after the long weekend. And I was like, 100%. But I love the realness in this. Like they're not working on the weekend. They're going to do it on like Tuesday.
We have Feel the Flow Friday. We don't usually work Fridays, and my team is amazing. And Andrea is the other person who you were emailing with. She's our VP of strategy. We got her from Disney Mexico, and her claim to fame is that she can sing like a Disney princess in Spanish. And I sometimes make her do it. And she's amazing. She's also incredibly smart at the metrics.
Clip? Can we share that on my show right now?
You should interview her because she you want to talk metrics and growth and all those things.
Yes.
Like as soon as I met her, I was like, I had a Tina Fey moment. I was like, I want to go to there. I was like, you're hired. Like it was like one interview. And I was like, you're in.
Did she sing her way through the interview?
No, I found out after I hired her about the singing. It was like a cherry on top.
I love when people have those like secret talents. Like, oh, by the way, I play drums with like Travis Barker. Excuse me? No, I don't. I have a drum set that's been collecting dust next to my desk. I should get back on that. Okay. One last question for you.
Okay.
When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
Ooh, what it means to be a wild woman. I think it's like remembering that being a woman means you are the most powerful creature on this planet in everything you do. Like you're a creator. Like I also want to keep dropping the F-bomb. You're like really firing me up, Renee. I won't.
So sorry. But no,
like,
you can just go, you'll explode.
I want you to feel me say it that way. I want you to be like, that is what you are.
So I'll tell you what, when I do allow this show to become explicit, I'll get you back on and then you can just go to town.
Deal.
Tell me all the F-bombs.
On it. Yeah.
We are the most, and I don't want to dismiss men, but there is something so powerful about women. We create life. Beyond that, we create podcasts too. Like, who are some of the top podcasters in the world? Like I know there's like Joe Rogan, Lewis House, these people, but there's women up there that are powerful beyond measure. These are people I admire so much. And what I love about women, and I had actually a client onboarding call yesterday, and it was the CEO of the company, the founder, and then her assistant. And the assistant was like, hey, I'm just not showing my video right now. And we're like, that's cool. And then when we asked her a question, she would turn the video on. She was breastfeeding her baby and typing on the other arm. And I'm like, oh, you don't have to be here. She goes, no, I want to be here.
Yeah.
She's like, are you cool with this? I said, I'm so cool with this. And I said, thank you so much for introducing me to your son. And then you just see little toes in the background. And I was like, the fact that women can create life, then feed life, and still do these things, and then just be most part sane at the end of the day, it's really impressive.
We are impressive, ladies.
Yeah, we are. And it's like, what time is it where you are now? 7:30?
7:25.
And you have a family, which I'm sure it's probably bedtime right now, huh? Or is that already
I'm kind of hiding on purpose because if I go upstairs, it's probably mayhem.
Okay, so we can just keep talking. Okay, so Erin, if people want to go online to find you and follow you, where can they go?
Yeah, so I would say www. Do you have to say that anymore? I don't think so. StoryStudioNetwork.com. That's where we're at. And feel free to find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. Erin Trafford. Just fire me a note or a connection request or whatever that may be. And Instagram. What is my Instagram? It's.Erin Trafford?
I think so.
I think that's what I am.
I'll just confirm that because I was just creeping you. Oh no, it's pulling up the wrong Erin. We'll make sure that's right in the show notes. So this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So there you have it. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Into the Wild. To make this girl happy and to help reach other women who are dreaming of starting their business, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes and everywhere you listen in. Also, if you want to find me in the wild, check me out on Instagram at Renee_Warren. That's RENEE_WARREN. And leaving you with one of my favorite tips of all time. The best advice you could ever receive is from someone who has successfully done it before you. Until next time, ladies, peace out.